Hello everyone, Elizabeth. Welcome or welcome back to another video. I am in a different background because we have our Christmas tree. We're going to be doing my top 10 books of 2024. Excuse the background noise, we do have a fire going in the background and that is what that noise is. And we'll see how much of this I can film without any interruptions. But starting off with book number 1 in my top 10 favorite books of the year. We're starting at the bottom of the list with number 10, and the first book I put on this list is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. I read this in August, and I absolutely loved this book. I definitely want to read more Agatha Christie. I've so far read 3 books by Agatha Christie, and they're all phenomenal books, and I need to read more because she is just an absolutely amazing and phenomenal author, and I absolutely love this book. If you don't know who Agatha Christie is, then I don't know what to say about that, but this is a murder mystery, obviously. That's what Agatha Christie writes, murder mysteries, and this was so good. The ending got me. I was like not expecting that. I loved it. It was amazing. Next, coming in at number 9, we have The Three Musketeers by Alexander Dumas. Realistically, maybe this one should be higher on my list, but it just didn't quite get higher than these other books I have on the list. And this book is so good. Basically, all I have to say is Alexander Dumas. Need I say more? I do not need to say more because Alexander Dumas is one of my favorite authors. He is amazing, and I want to read everything he's ever written, if that's even possible. I don't know if it is, but I want to read anything I can get my hands on by him, and I love The Three Musketeers. It's technically part of the D'Artagnan romances, so it's, I guess, technically classified as a romance novel, which I didn't know going into. But basically, when I was a kid growing up, I grew up loving this really old version of The Three Musketeers. My grandparents had this movie. I loved it so much. It was one of my favorite movies as a kid. And when I was a teenager and I was getting into reading, I actually did attempt to read The Three Musketeers. I was like, I really want to read this. And let's just say I didn't make it very far, and then I gave up. This was probably before I was officially reading classics. And then, last year I read Count of Monte Cristo and was like, this is the best book I've ever read. And so, this year I'm like, I want to continue and I want to read The Musketeers. And I did, and I loved it, and highly recommend. Definitely a phenomenal book, for sure. So going into book number 8, something I wanted to do this year was I wanted to read more sci-fi, because for some reason, I always used to have this preconceived notion in my head that I hated sci-fi, even though I never read sci-fi novels. I just thought in my head sci-fi is stupid. Where did I get that idea? I don't know, don't ask, because it's not. I like sci-fi. But this year I wanted to read more sci-fi, and I did read a couple of sci-fi books, but I didn't read as much as I was kind of wanting to. But I did read Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card, and this is a 5-star book, y'all. I absolutely obsessed. I loved this novel, and I want to read more of the books. I think Ender's Game is part of a series, and then there's another thing connected called Ender's Quartet or something. I don't know. There's lots of books in connection to Ender's Game, and I want to read some of them. But I loved Ender's Game. I thought this book was absolutely amazing. This is one of the books I read, I think, at the beginning of the year. But I absolutely loved this book. And yeah, thinking back, like, I honestly, like, forget about Ender's Game. And then when I think about Ender's Game, I'm like, oh my gosh, that was an amazing book. So I highly recommend, if you're into sci-fi, or even if you're not, to give it a shot, because it's a pretty small book, and I loved it. It was phenomenal. And again, it's a sci-fi book. We're set in space. It's about this kid. And yeah, it's amazing. And book number 7 is The Poetry of Lucy Maud Montgomery. I read this also in August. And I'm obsessed. I want to read more poetry by Lucy Maud Montgomery because, first off, if you don't already know, Lucy Maud Montgomery is my favorite author of all time, and her writing is just phenomenal. But I've read this book, or the majority of this book, while I was on vacation, and a lot of her poetry is nature related and things, and it's just so beautiful. And I was on vacation and there were so many different nature related poems. It was just so perfect. And I was just sitting there reading this book by the bay, reading a poem about the bay, and I was like, this is peak. This is amazing. I absolutely loved that book so much. And I'm trying to get my mom to read it. I think she said she's going to, but she just keeps forgetting that it's there. So I think she's gonna be getting to it soon. But if you're interested in poetry, I definitely highly, highly, highly recommend Lucy Maud Montgomery as a poet. She is amazing. I mean, everything she's written is ever amazing. I love Anna Green Gables, obviously. I have an obsession. But her poetry is phenomenal. Loved it. Book number 6 is Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson. This book, quite honestly, I did listen to an audiobook, but this book was honestly amazing. And I really, really, really want to get a physical copy because I loved this book. And yeah, I loved it. I loved it. Basically, if you don't already know what this is, it is one of the 4 secret projects that Brandon Sanderson did. And I have yet to read the 4th secret project book. I know I'm behind. I just don't have access to it, so I can't read it. Otherwise, I would have read it by now. But basically, Yumi and the Nightmare Painter is Brandon Sanderson's take on a romance novel. That's what I want to classify it as, because even though it's like a fantasy and whatever else, it is technically sort of like a romance. Like there is a romance, and that's like a large focus of the story. And there's a lot of other things into play. It's not just romance, but it was amazing. Coming in at number 5, we have The Blythes Are Quoted. Technically, this is a book I started last year, but I finally finished it this year, and what to say? Basically, this is a book that is set in Avonlea. It's a book full of short stories and poems. So the poems are written by Anne Blythe and Walter Blythe, which is Anne's son. And then the short stories are just stories set in Avonlea, and the title tells it all. The Blythes are quoted. In every single short story, the Blythes are quoted. Doesn't matter what Blythe it is. It might be Anne, it might be Gilbert, it might be one of the children. The Blythes are quoted. Like, usually it's Anne and Gilbert, but like, I just loved it. Because number 1, like I mentioned before, I love Ellen Montgomery's writing. And number 2, it had Anne and Gilbert, and it was amazing. And they were in some of the stories, and there's the poems, which were beautiful. And there was always some sort of a thing after the poem with like the different characters' thoughts. Like it would be like Anne's reading the poem to her family, and then it would show her family's thoughts, and it was beautiful. And some of the things that Gilbert says, I'm like, you are just the perfect person. I really love Ellen Montgomery, and I really loved this book, and I just thought it was amazing. Coming in at number 4, we do have Mistborn. There's a lot of Brandon Sanderson novels on here. I'm sorry. I just happened to read a lot this year, and like I've mentioned before, they were all amazing 6-star reads for me. So like I have to add them on this list. And so Mistborn, I actually read book 1 and 2. I think, did I read book 1 last year? Either way. Yeah, no, I read both 2. Okay, so I read Mistborn book 1 and Mistborn book 2. I still have to read book 3 and then the Wax and Wayne series, but I love it. I know I haven't read book 3 yet. Like, what's wrong with me? Why haven't I read that yet? What's wrong with me? I will get there when I get there. I have so many books to read. My siblings mostly are like, you haven't read that yet, what are you waiting for? Or why aren't you reading this book? Or you need to read this. And I'm like, I know I do. It's just, there are so many books. Like, other books take priority sometimes. And it's just, there's so many different things. But I absolutely love book 1 and 2 in the Mistborn trilogy, Mistborn Era 1. And yeah, I highly recommend Sanderson. These books, absolutely phenomenal. Loved them to death. Another fantasy series, in case you didn't know. Book number 3. I was absolutely obsessed with this book, and that is Seabiscuit by Laura Hillenbrand. I didn't think that anything could come close to Unbroken. Seabiscuit is right behind Unbroken in my love. Like, this book is almost as good as Unbroken, if not like on the same level, because it was amazing. I had the most fun reading experience while reading this, and I don't know how to explain that other than the fact that I loved this book to death. Like, going into Seabiscuit, if you don't already know what Seabiscuit is, it's about jockeys and horses and horse racing. And you might be thinking, but I'm not interested in horse racing or jockeys or anything related to that. Neither was I. And then I read this book, and now I'm just like, jaw drops on the floor, shocked. Because first off, this book was just amazing. I was kind of expecting that because of Laura Hillenbrand, and everyone I know who's read it says it's amazing. So I was kind of expecting it to be a good book, but I wasn't really expecting it to be, like, I wasn't expecting how good it was going to be. And let's just say that Laura Hillenbrand is phenomenal, and learning about the freaking jockeys and the stuff they do to be a jockey is insane. And the stuff that they go through, and the horse racing, they get injured, like, sometimes they die. Like, it's really bad, but also really interesting. And it was just so interesting following Seabiscuit and Red Pollard and everything. Like, it's just insane and phenomenal. And if you don't already know, Seabiscuit is a nonfiction. And yeah, this book was amazing. Laura Hillenbrand knows what she's doing, and also it was so much fun because towards the end of the book, that's when like all the giant like races go down, like the really like big ones, the ones that are like they've been training for so long and all that stuff. And after like I read about these races, I actually looked them up on YouTube and watched the race, like a real video footage of the real race happening, and I was like, it was so cool to me to do that, because as I was watching this race and hearing the announcer like saying all the stuff, I was like, yeah, I just read this just happened, like I know what's happening because I just read this. Like, it was just the coolest experience. Like, I just, like, I loved it. It was so much fun. There were 2 races that I looked up, and it was so much fun because I was like, I know what's happening. It's so cool. And yeah, I'm like horse racing. That's kind of cool. So yeah, I highly recommend Seabiscuit for sure. It's up there with Unbroken. Every time I recommend Unbroken, I'm gonna have to start recommending Seabiscuit as well, because I'm like, this is just phenomenal. Coming in at number 2, I am obsessed with this series. It's one of my new favorite series of all time, and this book was, I don't know if this is my favorite in the series actually, but it's my favorite book that I've read this year in the series. It's my favorite of the latter half of the series, but that is Lightbringer by Pierce Brown. This is the 6th book in the Red Rising saga, and I'm obsessed with the Red Rising saga. It is so good. Basically, it is a sci-fi. The first book is very reminiscent of the Hunger Games, but in space. But don't let that stop you, because first off, it's amazing, and second off, the other books are nothing like that in the slightest. It kind of takes a little bit of a different change and tone to it, but it is absolutely amazing. And I loved Lightbringer so much. I don't know if it's my favorite, but it might be my favorite in the whole series. Maybe not better than Morningstar. I'd have to reread them, but like, basically, I'm obsessed with the entire series. It is one of the first series in a very long time that I've read back to back and couldn't put down. Like, I am one of those people who starts like 5,000 different series, and I start a series, and then I start another series, and I don't come back to that other series for a long time. In the middle of like 5,000 different series, as you can tell. Mistborn being one of them. And so it's kind of rare for me to pick up a series and just read all of the books right in a row. But with Red Rising, I picked up Red Rising, read it, was obsessed, picked up Golden Sun and Morning Star immediately after, took a tiny bit of a break, and then like maybe like a couple of weeks or something, and then I read the next book, and then I whatever, Iron Gold or whatever, and then I read the next book, and I read them all within like a succession of each other, Dark Age and then Lightbringer, and I'm obsessed. I love these books so much. They were so good. I also read Dark Age this year, but Lightbringer is my favorite, I think, out of the last 4 books, 3 books. The last 3 books that I read, I think Lightbringer is my favorite out of those 3. The number 1 book in 2024 is Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. Of course, Sanderson came out on top. He seems to do that a lot, doesn't he? But need I say anything more? It is the latest book in the Stormlight Archives, and if you don't already know, the Stormlight Archives is my 3rd favorite book series of all time. Well, 4th favorite book series of all time, and I'm obsessed. I am obsessed with everything that Sanderson does, but the Stormlight Archives, they're just, I can't explain it. They're so good that I can't explain it. And I know there's a lot of like different opinions on Rhythm of War. I know a lot of people were disappointed with it, and I've heard a lot of people on the internet say like it wasn't what they were expecting, wasn't as good as the other 3, blah blah. I personally loved it and thought it was just as good as all the other books. Like, I love the heck out of it. I love everything Sanderson writes. I love the Stormlight Archive so much. And we only have a few days to like a week left or whatever until the freaking 5th book, and I'm so excited for Wind and Truth. And yeah, my family's kind of fighting over who's gonna read it, because my dad pre-ordered the book, so it's gonna come when it comes out. But we have like my entire family, basically, there's I guess 4 of us that want to read the book. And yeah, one of them pretty strongly is obsessed with Stormlight Archive, so, but it's coming, and they're gonna be on like a little vacation thing, and so I might be able to volley for myself being the first one to read it, maybe. And so that might be a book that I attempt to read in December, and we'll see. But I am obsessed with the Stormlight Archive, and Rhythm of War is no exception. I love that book. That is my top 10 books of 2024. We are in December, folks. We are going to be near the end of the year. We're going to be like, it's going to be like that, and it's going to be 2025, and it's going to be crazy, and I'm very excited for Christmas and all of that, so I'm excited to just see how the end of the year goes, and I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you in the next one. Hope you have fun reading this.